In this episode of the Caustic Rebel podcast,
when I think about the things which influence my personal experience in the area of cartilage biomechanics, there's a lot of parallels to what happens currently and things that you describe, PJ, in the area of plasma fusion research.
Go report.
Got it. Hello, and welcome to the Caustic Rebel podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Tom Quinn, coming at you from Thun, Switzerland.
And good evening. I'm Peter O'Shea, coming at you from Vancouver, Canada. The overall theme is, when is science mature enough to turn into a product? And what role does academia have in fostering that? And then at a meta level, what role do the leaders in academia have to clearly communicate the whole story? Tom and I both knew each other from studying in Canada. We're both engineering physicists as our first degree. And we met again in Boston when we were doing separate degrees. Tom is a PhD in mechanical engineering and has done extensive research in biomedical related fields, including working on a technology that you did try to fledge into a company. So you have experience with spinning off a company. Were you a professor at McGill?
Yeah, I was an associate professor at McGill for 6 years in the Department of Chemical Engineering. Yeah, I guess I should trace things just so our listener understands a bit better. We graduated, PJ and I graduated in the latter part of the 90s, right, from MIT. And I went
last century.
In the course of my PhD, I started working at a lab in Bern, Switzerland. And I met a young lady there who's now my wife, and after I finished my...
We got to tell that story, by the way. If our listener will love that story, but that's for podcast 7.
Okay, good. So I went back to Bern. I did a postdoc there. I went to Lausanne, Switzerland, the French-speaking part of the country, and I worked there for 10 years. And while I was there, I was working at the EPFL, and so I worked there for 10 years. And in that time, I was supervising graduate students and running a lab and building up research in the area of activity that I had started in my PhD at MIT, which was studying the biomechanics of cartilage, studying the way that the tissue functions and why diseases occur and what we can do about it. Anyways, that eventually turned into this associate professor job at McGill. And so we picked up and moved to Montreal and lived there for 6 years. We lived in a place called Beaconsfield on the West Island, and I would work downtown at McGill University. And through all of that, there was this commercial activity, which this is interesting. You know, when I think about the things which influence my personal experience in the area of cartilage biomechanics, there's a lot of parallels to what happens currently and things that you describe, PJ, in the area of plasma fusion research. Really? And it's I say it's funny because in the one case, plasma fusion research is of major importance in the history of mankind, if you will. Like if we ever get this technology under control, it's going to make a huge difference, right? But at the moment, it's out of reach.
Them's fighting words. Dennis
White
is going to come right at you,
yes.
man.
Fair enough. But that
We got to get him on the Caustic Rebel podcast, by the way.
Yeah. So, but what I was going to say was like my fighting words were that if I'm a skeptic, I say that, look, I mean, plasma fusion is a great idea and we're going to get there at some point, but right now it's too early for that technology, right? And you can say the exact same thing about the area that I was involved in, or when I started at MIT, the idea of engineering cartilage tissue, like building cartilage tissue in a Petri dish, and growing it up to be mechanically functional enough that you could put it into somebody's joint and replace a damaged region of cartilage. That idea was very much science fiction. When I started at MIT, this would have been like 1990. And then over the time that I was there, like through the 90s, there was a kind of inflation that took place because there was a lot of people developing careers, a lot of people who graduated who got active in the field around the same time I did, maybe even in 10 years earlier. They started to need something to get people excited about their work, which was primarily motivated by understanding better the physical chemistry of cartilage and how that relates to the biology of the tissue. But that just puts people to sleep, right? If you say what I just said. So when you write a grant proposal, you have to start to couch it in terms that are exciting and spark the imagination. And so tissue engineering becomes a good candidate for all of that. And so tissue engineering of cartilage specifically became a theme, and it's a theme to this day. People talk openly about, we're going to make artificial cartilage tissue and implant it in people's joints.
Is that the premise of your company?
Indirectly. I'll get there in a second.
Okay, sorry.
The point of the research that I was doing, like as PJ mentioned, I'm a mechanical engineer, and so I'm constantly looking for ways that mechanical engineers can contribute to biomedical problems. And this is an aside, maybe it's another podcast, but in the years that I've been active in the field, or that I was active in the field, it was pretty obvious that chemical engineers were very well positioned to contribute to biomedical engineering. Mechanical and electrical engineers a bit less so. That's a very broad generalized statement.
Sure.
But in the area that I was involved in, that was kind of a theme, was that mechanical engineers were struggling to identify problems that they could work on and contribute to.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster right there. It's like, that's cart before the horse, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
I very much felt that. I very much felt it. I was, I got into biomedical engineering because I wanted to apply my skills as an engineer to medical problems, to help people, and to be relevant in that way. One thing led to another, and I got involved in this line of research, which I made contributions to that I'm very, very proud of.
Now that I'm thinking about my own comment, I think it can be okay, but I think it's like, I want to find where my skills come to bear. And as long as you're open to the idea that they don't, and that's too much of a long shot and go find somewhere else, then I think that's fine. That isn't cart before the horse. And it's not a huge stretch to think that mechanical engineering could be relevant in that field. It's not. I think it's okay. But I think where you might be going, or I'll just hypothesize something. It is very possible that in any field, you're mining away, tick, 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 you've got a vein. It's like, ooh, this is promising. And then it starts to narrow down and go dry, and you keep looking, and there's sort of nothing left.
Yeah.
If your mandate remains, how do I stay relevant, even though I have nothing left to talk about or contribute? That is where it gets problematic. If the vein sort of gets mined out.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of relevance to what you just said for the course of my career. Somebody came to me one day and they had a really good idea. They said,
so like when?
When was this? It was when I was working at EPFL.
Okay. So you
So,
started as a grad student in like 1990?
89, actually, September 89. Yeah.
Okay, I should have known that. 89. And when did you get out of academia?
I got my grade 40.
Okay, great.
It was 2013.
Oh, I got that right. But anyhow, so this was EPFL. So somewhere in the middle of that 24 years of academia.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So,
What's the killer idea?
well, the killer idea was that I have to give you a bit of background. One of the strategies for doing cartilage tissue engineering is to you start with cartilage cells that produce the extracellular matrix of the tissue. Right? Cartilage is mainly extracellular matrix. It's a material that's elaborated by cells that are embedded inside of the tissue. So you need these cells in order to make the tissue for you. And the idea was that if you could have a whole bunch of these cells, put them in a certain configuration, they'll make the tissue for you, which you can then use to replace defects in people's knees and joints. There's huge problems with these next steps, but the first step is to make some artificial tissue. In order to do that, you need some cells. And in order to get cells, where are you going to get the cells from, right? The hope was that you could take cartilage from a person's joints in a region that is not terribly load-bearing, a region that's not super important, and then liberate the cells from the extracellular matrix, multiply them in cell culture, and then put them in an environment which causes them no longer to multiply, but to produce extracellular matrix, and then let them make artificial tissues.
So
go ahead.
I'm imagining this. You tell me how. I'm sort of imagining a 3D like grid of little like strands of tough spaghetti. That's the extracellular matrix made out of collagen or something like that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And there's all these little voids in there. That's where the actual living stuff is going to site and sort of help live and help maintain the house that it's
exactly.
living in?
Exactly. Okay. Like the cells are inclusions inside the tissue at a volume density of about 10%. Okay. And so a key step in that whole process I described was this: you start with some cartilage cells and you multiply them, right? You put them in cell culture and you let them multiply. Well,
how
cartilage cells, how hard could it be, right? The thing is, when standard cell culture works in a two-dimensional configuration, you lay cells on a flat surface, a petri dish, you give them nourishment and you let them do their thing and they multiply. As soon as you put chondrocytes, cartilage cells, in that environment, they multiply, but they lose their identity as chondrocytes. They start to behave more like skin cells rather than cartilage cells.
Already fascinating, but in your case, disappointingly fascinating.
Yeah, for that field, it's a huge stumbling block, right? So the question is, how do you? I'm almost getting to the punchline. I feel like I'm being very long-winded, but
I'm interrupting, so I'm sorry.
Just to set up this technology that I was involved in, the idea that this person had, it was a brilliant idea. The problem for the chondrocytes was that they're not used to having neighbors next to them. They're used to being embedded in this extracellular matrix all by themselves. Maybe they send an email every once in a while to a neighbor, but they're not touching their neighbors, right? When you grow them in culture, they multiply a little bit and they start to touch each other, and then it causes them to perceive their role differently, and then they become something other than a cartilage cell. So you start with cartilage cells, you try to multiply them, and you end up with something that's not even cartilage anymore, and then you're trying to make artificial cartilage tissue with that, and it doesn't work very well. This person had the idea: look, let's grow the cells in an environment that if you would take one cell and just try to grow it, they don't do very well, because they need these emails that go back and forth to their neighbors. They need to know they're not alone, right? But they don't want to be touching, right? And so
it sounds like I'd do well as a cartilage cell.
So what the idea was, let's seed the cartilage cells at a certain density on a surface so that they start to multiply, but don't let them get dense enough that they touch each other. which sends the wrong signal to them. Let's put them on a stretchy surface, a piece of silicone, right, rubber that you can pull apart like an expanding universe, and you keep these multiplying cells at a more or less constant density without letting them touch, right? And so that'll allow us to do standard methods of two-dimensional cell culture, but keep the chondrocyte cells feeling like chondrocytes and not like fibrocytes or whatever the name is for skin cells. And it worked. There was measurable improvements in the gene expression, in the identity of the cells when you cultured them in this new way, so that it was favorable for tissue engineering. And then the technology that I developed was a device that opens like the iris of a camera and has a silicone rubber stretchy Petri dish inside of it. And so it facilitates this method of cell culture, which keeps chondrocytes physically separated from their neighbors, but in a cell culture context, so that we can grow the cells for tissue engineering.
I'm sold. How much do you want a seed investor? It's a good idea. It's got promise. But you're doing this in a academic.
The person who came up with this idea, I really should give credit where credit's due. It was a guy named Werner Müller, a Swiss guy, and he had a friend, Heribert Frey. And I think it was between these two guys that they came up with this idea.
They were contemporaries of yours? Were they students of yours? Were they?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. They were like engineers working in Switzerland. And they had by one
same lab, same, like, was this over lunch?
God, I don't.
What were they
doing
remember. Talking about? You were yabbering on about cartilage again, and they finally said something to get you to shut up. They're like, yeah, we will solve it for this yattering Canadian.
No, but Heribert was, I think he was working in association with a hospital, or in association with a laboratory, and developing surgical tools for cartilage repair surgery. And
I'm sorry is it
no?
How politically incorrect is it to do terrible accents of people?
Oh, it's okay, man.
Okay,
Swiss people, they make fun of themselves all the time. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I just wanted to give credit where credit's due. The original idea was not mine. It was my contribution was more figuring out a way to do it that could be conceivably commercialized, you know.
And you're in an academic lab. You're in a lab at an academic institute. You're doing this research. I mean, are you immediately thinking, how do I productize this, or where? Because the theme here, the overall theme is, when is an idea good science, and then when is good science mature enough to turn into a product, and what role does academia have in fostering that? And then at a meta level, what role do the leaders in academia have to clearly communicate the whole story?
We'll get to what role academia should have in a minute. I think it would be instructive for me to just point out that tissue engineering of cartilage doesn't really exist as a thing.
Even
right?
Still?
Well, I mean, I don't want to undermine the work that other people are doing, and I haven't been directly involved in the field.
Welcome to my world. I'm saying that fusion isn't ready, and everyone's like, yeah, well, you'll never work in this town again, buddy.
The thing is, all that cartilage tissue engineering has ever been is a hopeful idea.
I now concur with your analogy to fusion.
Yeah, you see?
Because as far as I can tell, no one's ever made a piece of toast with electricity from a fusion reactor.
Yeah. Well,
and nobody's out there revitalizing their hockey career with a knee meniscus that you made for them.
Yeah, exactly. Cartilage tissue engineering doesn't exist as a reality in hospitals. Like, doctors do not use cartilage tissue engineering to treat their patients.
Yeah.
You know, in very exotic.
Here's a good one.
in very exotic experimental situations,
Sure.
experiments are performed, but it's not a medical treatment. So
Would it, even in humans, would some human have had some sort of, I thought they did stuff with ears and things already with people.
yeah, that's what I'm referring to when I say that in an experimental context.
Okay.
But it's not a thing. Like if you go to a typical hospital and you say, or they diagnose you as having a defect in your knee, a piece of cartilage is missing. The solution is not, oh, well, we'll grow some
New one.
cells in a petri dish and replant them in your knee, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't exist,
Yeah.
right? And so all of the work that I was doing was basically in support of a nice idea which didn't exist as a clinical reality, right?
Yeah.
So that was the problem, and the potential for uptake of my technology existed in an academic context. Other academics might be interested in it, but there's no general relevance to what I was doing. It's not a product that is used, right?
Sure, but maybe someday. And so that's
Absolutely,
the idea,
maybe
right?
someday.
Like,
yeah.
Tune in next time, dear listener, as your dynamic duo tackle other daunting questions with other guests. Stay tuned for our upcoming 3-part series with Conor McGregor.
Well, a wrecking ball is swinging, ringside bells and ring.